Hey, happy Black History Month again. And I think I'll just start by, before I introduce myself and let Iz introduce herself, I'll start by asking you how you're feeling today. Have you grabbed something for lunch already? Have you had your coffee? Are you already hoping it's Friday? Just put it in the chat. We want to know that the chat function is working, and that also that you've had your coffee. I haven't had coffee this morning. I've had a glass of water, but hopefully I can get something to eat later on. My name is Nikkei Polayan. I am co-founder of the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers. I am also a technical director at a company called WSP, which is an global engineering consultancy. And I wear many other hats, which I wouldn't bore you with this afternoon. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. My name is Isabella. Everybody just calls me Iz. I am the consortium director at the Black Researcher Consortium, and I also run a specialist consultancy in social impact. So that encompasses youth engagement, ethical leadership, EDI, and indeed social impact. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm very happy to be here with these lovely people today. Should be a really informative session. I would like, yes.
There appears to be an issue with people only seeing white screens. I'm just saying it for admin to try and sort out. Can everybody see me? Can anyone see? Okay, people can see. Yeah, I can see the four of you. So yeah, okay, all right, cool. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You can see me now, and obviously I'm the most important. No, just they need to see. Sorry, I'll hand back to you.
No, not at all. I think I was done with my intro, so I'm going to hand over to our excellent panelists today. So first of all, let's go to Aneni. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aneni Bambara Aban. I am a robotics engineer, creative technology stroke artist, and I'm creative technology relationship manager at the British Council, which is essentially just working at the intersection of arts and technology within the British Council. Nice to meet you all. Michael, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Michael Groenewoud. I'm someone who's really focused on data and AI strategy, with a particular focus therein on responsible AI. I often say that I operate at the intersection of ethics, technology, and history, because I also bring not only technological perspectives to what I do, and I think it's also really important because technology is not something that evolves in a vacuum. It's really also a part of society and a reflection of society, and that's what I also really bring in the way I approach technology. For a long time, I worked at a big consultancy firm where I was a data and AI lead. But all throughout my career, my focus has really been on research and data. And that's what I try to continue to do while incorporating more ethical and responsible AI practices in it.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we have some questions lined up. For the audience, you're more than welcome to pop questions in the chat as we go along, and Nikkei and I will do our best to pick them up and put them to our guests too. But yeah, I think as a starting point, let's go super basic and just get a proper understanding. What even is AI? Because we hear it all over the place and some of us may not even know what it means. So let's go to you, Michael, first. For what's your definition of what AI is?
Yeah. Two things I can say about that. I think, like, more formally, you could look at AI as, for sense of artificial intelligence. You could say that it refers to technology or multiple technologies that are aimed at basically mimicking the capabilities that humans have. If you take this a step further, it could also like exceed the things that humans can do. And that's basically like the more technical way of looking at it. But also the reality is, like, for instance, when I look at the last few years, also within consultancy, the term AI is also very much being used as a more marketing PR term, basically as also umbrella term that basically then denotes almost everything that you do with data, etc. That's not necessarily what really is AI, but that's also how it's used now. So, like, whenever you do something with analytics or whenever you do something with data forecasting, nowadays you call it AI. Also, when you look at just at ads, etc. You see like a lot of stuff they say like, okay, it's powered by AI. That doesn't necessarily always mean anything, but of course it is a flashy thing. And because the term artificial intelligence, that really also suggests a certain thing about the technology. But I think language is very important there, because the technology, even though it's called artificial intelligence, it is not really intelligent. And I think that's also very important in how we talk about these matters, because like if you really approach it as something that is already intelligent, as if it can also like independently make decisions, that's also a way to basically deflect accountability to technology. But that's not really how it works. It looks at patterns that it finds in the data, at correlations that it finds in the data, and based on that, it can come at predictions or like advice decisions that decision could take, but it's not that it really understands it. And that's why it's very important to also really also focus on the accountability part, and that the technology isn't really intelligent. So all the intelligence that that is in there, that really needs to come from humans. Also, humans really need to supervise the technology. It's not something that you can leave just to the technology. So it's basically you could say like it's a nice flashy term, but it suggests more than it actually is right now. And so yeah, that's just some of the reflections that I have on the term. There's a lot more that I can say about it, but just some first thoughts.
Wow,
Yeah,
some
no.
pretty deep, reflective first thoughts, Nenny.
No, I'd echo everything that Michael said. I always say, I think because of my background in robotics, like it's pretty common knowledge in robotics that machines are stupid. Machines don't know anything. We are what makes the machine intelligent. I think just keeping in on that kind of trajectory of talking about terms that we might hear coming up today. Maybe another one to kind of differentiate would be machine learning, because I feel like AI and machine learning gets used very interchangeably. And I like to say, like, think of AI as like the overarching goal of creating intelligent systems. And machine learning is the way of achieving that goal. So it's like using algorithms to identify patterns. And then, as Michael said, it makes predictions from that data. So yeah, if anyone's ever wondered the difference between machine learning and AI, I think that's a very like basic introductory way to speak about it. And then another term that I hear a lot is generative AI. So think of your chat GPTs and, all that kind of stuff. Those are basically types of AI that create new content that could be text, videos, images, anything, through learning patterns from vast data sets. So in terms of like in the workplace or things that you might come across day to day, generative AI is probably the one that you'll or more commonly come across. So that just to give a little glossary there, but yeah, these terms do end up being used interchangeably.
That's absolutely fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. I in my head, AI is my definition of AI is almost intelligent. And that way it keeps me sane when you put things when my AI reading AI turns up to meetings before I get there, or leaves in advance to the end of the meeting. So
I always say it's like my creative partner that I'm slightly scared of. I'm just like, I like you, but I don't know. You might screw me over one day. That's how I kind of engage with AI. But yeah.
Yeah. So my next question was on the benefits of using AI. We talked about it being scary. We talked about it being this thing that we have to. I almost think we have to kind of control in a way to ensure that it doesn't do stuff we don't want it to do. So what are the benefits of using AI in the business environment? And I'll start from yourself, Michael, and then we'll go to Nenny.
Yeah, like I think I can continue also where Nenny left off. Like there are also like different forms of AI. So indeed, she mentioned generative AI, but there are also like more traditional forms before that. That has more to do with like forecasting systems, or like computer vision, like also like image recognition, speech recognition. So there are different types of AI. So there are different ways that AI can help. For instance, like when you just look at the technology that we're using now, like Teams, or we could also be using Zoom technology. There's also AI that factors into how we use this. For instance, like the way that we are represented on screen, for instance. Like just 4 or 5 years ago, during the pandemic, if we were on a Zoom call and we were using like these artificial backgrounds, it could happen if I just move a little bit that I disappear, fall in the background. So that is also something that has improved, but also there's a lot of analytics, algorithmic work that goes into that. So that's also already one way, just in all the day-to-day activities that we have, that you see AI popping up. And then we specifically look at like the generative AI that has been coming up more and more the last few years, especially when you combine it also with different kinds of technology. For instance, when it also integrates in chatbots, that's when you arrive at, for instance, assistants, the term that you hear a lot nowadays, also agentic AI, that basically is also still just an assistant, but the difference is like you interact with it and it can, for instance, also do activities for you. So it becomes more and more independent in its operations. And what you can have with these systems is like, for instance, they can assist you in your work. You can use it, for instance, to brainstorm. That's a way that you could also use it. When it comes to your writing, you can first use it to create a first draft for you, etc. Those are things that are ways that it can help you. Other ways that it could help you, for instance, is that because when you look at healthcare, they have a lot of interesting cases. For instance, like those cases are being trialed also in the UK, where you see that when you use AI, that AI is better able to like detect certain bone fractures that humans would miss. But when you use the technology, you can detect them. Also when it comes to, for instance, like health predictions, like cardiovascular health. There's also a trial going on there. Based on AI, you can basically predict what's going to happen like 5 to 10 years from now, and then based on those predictions, you can now also like proactively take steps to prevent that or to try to steer it into another direction. So those are some of the examples where you can see like, okay, AI can actually then support you in your work. You could also refer to it as augmented intelligence or assisted intelligence, in that sense that it then helps you. Also, that's basically like the more positive reading of AI, what it can do. And later on, we will also go to the flip side, because like, yeah, basically like the same thing that could be positive could also very much be negative. But for now, we'll just start positive, and these are some of the ways that AI can help you.
Okay. Penny, do you have any additions to what's been said?
Yeah, I think yeah, Michael said it perfectly, but you know, I completely agree. I think there's so many interesting ways that we can apply AI, and I mean, there's ways that we use AI now that we might not even know that are AI. For example, predictive text. You know, when you're literally having autocorrect, changing things based off how you speak, it's kind of identified patterns in your language, or just as simple as your iPhone and going to your photo gallery and writing cats, and you know, it being able to find every single picture in your gallery that is a cat. That's basically using a type of computer vision to be able to, you know, analyze that that's a cat. So I speak to a lot of people who are very scared of AI, and I honestly, for like I said earlier, it's my partner that I'm a little bit scared of. So it's completely understandable. But I think that we're engaging with AI in more ways than we realize already. I think when it comes to the workplace specifically, the ways I can kind of see benefits of using AI, one is like very obviously productivity. There's certain tasks that we don't want to have to keep on repeating, certain emails that we might send all the time. And AI can essentially know how we speak and what our language is like, and just be able to, you know, almost regurgitate that information without us having to waste time. You know, working on that, we can actually focus on more strategic or creative work. For example, when I'm sending emails and I'm replying to somebody, if I go an email from Aneni, my Gmail basically says, "Hi, Aneni," like literally just starts with that. So those are really like simple ways where AI is being collaborative as opposed to offensive, or you know, because then you're not getting the person's name wrong, you're not spelling it wrong. There's just different advantages of that. In HR, we see that people are using it to screen CVs, which, you know, has its pros and its cons, I will say. But I cannot deny that it has increased productivity within HR exponentially. And it allows more time for, you know, recruiters to actually engage with candidates. So yeah, productivity is definitely kind of a more obvious one, but I think it helps us as well in making better decisions. So if you think about TfL, for example, and the fact that data, or I say data, AI can analyze large amounts of data fairly quickly. And that can be, for example, in the case of TfL, just being able to predict which stations are busier, being able to somewhat control the traffic if a train needs to maybe wait at one station because another station is congested, things like that. So that's really, really beneficial ways of using AI in a more transport setting. And then the third one, I think, is customer experience and innovation. I think that things like AI chatbots have revolutionized a lot of businesses. For example, with banks, having chatbots or having first kind of, or even Amazon having a chatbot that you can speak to for maybe questions that would be very easy to answer, but there's nobody working at that hour to actually answer your question. Those are cases where chatbots can be very helpful. Again, like I said, for every positive, there is also a negative. And then there's many times I've been angry at an Amazon chatbot, I will not lie. But for out of hours situations, I think that's when it becomes really useful. So I say, yeah, AI does help organizations work smarter, faster, but I think only if it's used responsibly.
What a note to end on and lead into the next question. But fascinating that there's so many uses already going on and some of us don't even realise that we're engaging with it. So I think one of my concerns with it all is that it is a relatively new technology. It's being honed, it's being perfected, and people at the same time are on a super steep learning curve on how to actually use it in the best way. So what potential issues are there with that combination of new tech and people learning it, and how can we mitigate that? Michael, let's come back to you.
Yeah, I think what is very important is that what you can refer to as AI literacy or AI understanding. People, if you also really educate themselves about like what the technology really is. For instance, when I talk about like the language aspect, that's an important thing to know, that that is not really intelligent, but also just how it works under the hood. Because if you have a better understanding, even if it's more on a high level basis, then you have also better understanding of like what are the risks with the technology. An example that I can also give that directly relates to like how people do work. For instance, like AI can indeed help you in your decision making. It can create draft documents for you. But when you, for instance, use generative AI, because it doesn't really understand the data, it can come up with answers that sound great, that could be true, but actually are not true, and that can be a real problem. If, for instance, if you're a professional, a consultant, or a lawyer, you present that to your clients, then in technical terms, nowadays they refer to it as hallucination in the data. That is something that, it simply is fictitious. There have been a lot of cases, for instance, when it comes to lawyers, a lot of cases from Australia also specifically, where lawyers used the technology, but then it was determined that the work that they cited did not even exist. And I think when you then use the technology, it's important to be aware of how it actually works, so that you are aware of these kinds of risks, but also that you really also follow like the guidelines that are already in place. Because when it comes to checking your own work, whether you use AI or not, if I would include something in my work as a lawyer or as a consultant, I have an obligation also to check that. So I think as the leverage part is important, but also as organizations that you need to make sure that you also then have proper guidance in place for how you're going to use the technology. Because using technology itself doesn't necessarily also have to be a problem. But for instance, if you use it and you don't check the outcomes, then it is a problem. But that's something that can be mitigated with guidelines. And you don't even need new guidelines for that. Because like I said, like if you're a lawyer or a consultant, you're already obligated to check your work. So if you don't do that, then whether you use AI or not, you're not following the professional guidelines. So I think that's one aspect that's important if you want to basically operate in this new age of where AI is indeed it's more of a place and more places being used. And another thing that I find important, because of course there are a lot of things that I find important, but when it comes to ethics, I talk about ethics a lot, but I think ethics is in this AI conversation often placed as something that comes later on, but actually ethics is something that starts at the beginning, even before you want to work with technology, you could ask yourself a question like, okay, why am I going to do this? Why do I want to do this? Or is it even an ethical or proper way to do it? And because nowadays we look at so many things that you can do with AI, we look at the risks, for instance, like deep fake, voice clones, disinformation, misinformation. That is not something that comes out of nowhere, because that was already there. And when you look at the technology, you can already know for certain that that is only going to reinforce those issues. So before you introduce the technology like to everywhere, you can also say, okay, is this really an ethical or smart thing to do, or might it actually destabilize society if you do that? So I think that ethical thinking, it's important that you have that, but not just as something afterwards, but already before you do some things. Because a lot of the first, when you look at generative AI, for instance, like I worked in data science for a long time. Before generative AI became this big, the discussion was always like that. No, AI can make stuff easier for you, make stuff more efficient. The boring stuff, it can take that for you. But the more high value stuff, all the creative activities, etc., that is for you humans. And okay, that's nice. But of course, when generative AI becomes so big, what does generative AI actually do? It directly impacts creative work. Whole creative industries are impacted by it. So that communication part, it's important to be honest in communication, and also just think ahead when it comes to like, okay, what could the potential impacts be, and then also take the steps to like, it's not wrong to ask yourself like, okay, is this something that we really want to do or not? Because it's also important to look at, when you look at technology and also like the companies that are driving it, a lot of them are like big companies with like I keep it real in my talks, big companies with a certain Western mindset that are basically following like one certain paradigm of thinking. When you look at the whole mindset is like everything needs to be bigger and faster. You need to go ahead. Like there's only one route, one way to do things. But that way of thinking, that is very much also based to a certain way of thinking that is more colonial and white supremacist in nature. Because in that, when you look at the characteristics of white supremacy culture, one of the ways that also shows up is like that there's only one way to do things. It's either this or that, and that progress always means faster, bigger, etc. And that's what you really see also in the AI technology that's being pushed, because it's now like almost like as if you don't have a choice, as if we don't have a choice with the technology. But I'm like, yeah, actually, this is not inevitable. Like that we just go full steam ahead. That's a choice that is also made there. It's not that we couldn't make different choices. So I think that's also important to have as we approach technology to realize that the way that we approach this is very much also tied to historical patterns that are again being reproduced, not only for its biases that show up in technology, but also like just in the way that technology is pushed ahead uncritically without considerations for ethics and societal impacts. So yeah, that's just again some of the reflections.
I love that your reflections are like, I mean, there's so many things there to unpack, but I think one of the things that really struck me in what you just said is, and I think a lot of us know it, but it needs to be reiterated, is that AI feeds on what we give it, on existing information that's already out there. And so one of the biggest challenges with it is that it can and does perpetuate existing biases, imbalances, prejudice. So yeah, fascinating answer. And I love that we need to think about ethics from the very start before we even start using it all the way through the process. Nenny, do you have anything to add to that prolific answer?
I know, that was brilliant. No, not really. I think personally, this is something I live by because I'm a massive nerd. I have a whole anime company in case anyone is an anime fan, but I'm also a big comic fan. And I think one of the things I kind of live by is with great power comes great responsibility, said by Uncle Ben, Spider-Man.
Yes.
I feel very like attuned to that. I feel like there's a greater responsibility when we use tools like AI for us to really look inwards and challenge our own biases, whether that is, learned societal or straight up biases that we may have. I think it challenges us to really look at ourselves. The thing about AI is that it's a futuristic tool that's based off past data. Like it's heavily trained, the underlying kind of data sets of it all is stuff in the past. And I'm not being funny. A lot of us don't want to repeat the past. There's a lot of toxicity in the past that we want to leave in the past. So I think it's when we're making prompts, is being mindful, knowing what we're asking, making sure that we're asking questions and challenging how AI is used in the workplace. For example, a very kind of, I know you spoke about mitigating some of that risk. I think AI literacy has to be part of the workplace. I think it needs to, we're at a point, and not just the workplace, schools, from primary school. I feel like in society in general, we need to start having those conversations and knowing exactly what artificial intelligence is, how it can impact us, and how it could potentially change in the future. Yeah, everyone needs a baseline understanding of that. And I think it's kind of the responsibility of companies now, especially from senior leadership and HR, to make sure that, could be a Wednesday afternoon doing a lunch and learn, and, just doing a workshop on what AI actually is, and the ways that maybe you could use it in the company. For example, I remember it was a few years ago now, but there was a big scandal with Samsung because a couple employees actually were using ChatGPT to upload full-on code. So they were like, can you help me with my code? Can you help me with this? This is currently happening at Samsung. Da, 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 da. And I mean, from a company standpoint, that is like an operational nightmare. That is horrendous, because the thing about ChatGPT, unless you explicitly use the disappearing, there's a function that you can use, which basically means that they don't train the model based off any of your personal data that you feed it. But a lot of people don't know about it, and a lot of people don't use that function. So if you're just using ChatGPT thinking, oh yeah, they've said in the meeting that we can use AI, if in some certain use cases to help us with our work. And here you are going just crazy with it and saying, yeah, so today in this meeting, we discussed, this unreleased Samsung S2500, and it's like XYZ. Yeah, so it was a whole thing, and because of this sensitive data that had been shared, and it was like a complete lockdown. I mean, I think there was even also a couple of years ago, Italy completely banned ChatGPT. I think it's back now, but they completely banned it, just because of how they were kind of worried with people are feeding this a lot of personal sensitive information, and where is all of this going? So yeah, I think to kind of wrap up, I'd say education and training is not a nice to have, it's a necessity. We're not even going, we're in a technological age where if you kind of don't get with the program, you get left behind. And that's, I speak to a lot of people who fight technology, and I get it. I understand. Like, I love the days of the Nokia 3310 when everything was so basic. But it's like, we can't run away from it. It's here, and it's only going to get more complex. And like Michael said, a lot of that bias, and there's so many things that are being ingrained in it now that unless we're at the forefront of these conversations, unless we're, people that look like me, like you, are in the rooms when these algorithms are being designed, the ramifications will be immense. So yeah, I'd say education, training, in the workplace, maybe piloting AI, so using it in like small cases. So yeah, you can maybe having like a ChatGPT business license, for example, which means that any of the data that you feed it by default is not used to train the models. But of course, it's very expensive, and so there's different things that you can do if the company as a whole wants to increase to use AI in its productivity. And I think also being transparent and in hiring processes, saying that, yeah, we do use AI to initially review CVs. I think it's because at the end of the day, I don't want to do all this work and apply for a role and a HR software that uses AI is basically saying I'm not qualified, when you literally, a human can look at your CV and be like, you're a great catch. That would be horrendous. And I don't know how many times that could have happened to me in the multiple rejections that I've got. So it's things like that. And just kind of talking on that point, I met somebody recently who works in HR who told me that if you actually write in white, like the font, you make the color white and you write on a page somewhere on your CV saying, this CV has, been approved for being I don't know, a good CV or some kind of prompt that essentially tells the AI that this is a good CV and they should get through to the next stage, you can bypass a lot of this HR software. I essentially say that, yeah, that's a top tip in case you want to apply. But yeah, no, it's things like that. And these systems aren't foolproof. These systems aren't this amazing savior that we should all be relying on. So I think it's, going back to with great power comes great responsibility, knowing that when you're using these softwares and these technologies, that you are using them ethically and responsibly, and you're thinking about what you're feeding in, and you're thinking about how you're co-creating with AI. Yeah, I think that's how I would. This is a good suit. Yep. Literally.
That's incredible.
Can you imagine if you just put that in white writing? When it scans it,
actually wild, isn't it?
Yeah. That's incredible.
Wow.
I'm thinking is that there are some very interesting questions that have been asked, and I'd like to get through to them. And one of them links to what you were just speaking about, Denny. It's from Natalie, and she was from STEM Returners, our wonderful partners at STEM Returners. I worry about candidates who are already sidelined through standard application channels such as Returners being really impacted by AI in recruitment. How can hiring managers mitigate the risks of AI negatively impacting diversity and inclusion in hiring? Any kind of...
Yeah, no, this is a really difficult, and this is personally why I don't advocate for using AI in recruitment, because it's no secret that, I've applied for roles and literally helped my friends do their CV, and they've applied for the same role. Not to toot my own horn, but my CV is considerably better than theirs. And I believe that literally it could be as simple as things like my name being an African name. Like that's just the experience of being a Black woman working in STEM. Like I have to deal with that all the time. And so this is something that I constantly talk about. And, I think when it comes to companies, it's left to them to be really responsible in this sense. It's left to them to be like, okay, we need to have an AI ethics board. We need to consult. We need to find people who are working in this space. Hire Michael. This is what he does day in, day out. We need to find people who are working in this space who can help us and consult with us, because I don't believe that I should feed my CV that I've worked ages on into a system. And just because of one small detail like my name or something that I've just formatting, something wrong with my CV, I've been completely discounted from being eligible for that role. So I think anyone that is using that software, that if there is capacity, there should always be a second kind of human look. There should be human involvement in the process. It shouldn't be as simple. If you're using AI in a HR setting, let it be to look for certain keywords. Like if it's a very specific role, like working in, I don't know, robotics process automation or something, can you see that actually those keywords on that CV? Can you see RPA, things that are related to it on the CV? And then let it just be for sorting or organizing, making sure that that person actually has some relevance to the role. Because I think any role you're applying for, you should have the keywords of the role that you are applying for in it somewhere. So yeah, I think those are the ways that I think people should be working with it, but it's a scary issue, and it's one that I think has directly impacted me. So with great power comes great responsibility. It's left to the powers that be and those in charge to make sure that they're really working ethically and that they hire Michael.
It's a great point. Sorry, Michael, carry on. You look like you were going to pick up there.
Yeah. So I think hire me. I think that's great advice. But I think
excellent advice.
But when it comes again, when I talk about ethics, like I say, like ethics is also like asking yourself the question, like, okay, should I use the technology or not? Talking as someone within the company, but also like, okay, let's be real about society, because like the reason that these issues are there when you use AI in recruitment is because they are an issue right now in recruitment, the way that humans are doing it. Because the reality is like there are different forms of AI. AI could in the past was also based on hard decision rules, with basically humans encoding, okay, what's supposed to do. But the current generation is based on machine learning, and then he also already touched upon, but that is based on data. So it learns all the patterns, all the decisions, it learns from the data. But if the data, for instance, in recruitment, is based on the decisions that the hiring managers have historically made, if you're honest about it, and if you keep it real, then you know that racism is an issue there, that sexism very much is an issue there. So if you're just going to reproduce that then in your system without mitigating for that, without checking for that, then you should not even be surprised that there is a bias in there. Because like the way that the technology actually is set up is that it's supposed to reproduce what's in the data. So if it then does what it's supposed to do, then the outcome should actually then also be very biased. So it's something that you know beforehand. So if you then don't take the steps to mitigate that, then I would say that as an organization, you are morally and ethically also dropping the ball, because you cannot say that you don't know. It's simply then that you do not care. That's the real issue. Because this isn't even about a real technical issue. This is more a moral and ethical failure issue from the humans, because that's what you need to do there. And also but even if you then decide to implement these technologies, transparency is then also a very important issue, because if you then make a system and you say that you can apply it to everyone, they should also be able to, in your documentation, be able to show okay, we've actually tested it on different groups. We can actually show that our data came from different groups and that it was balanced. We've also tested the outcomes for different groups, so we can actually see if you scan it for different groups, whatever. For instance, if you look at gender or if you look at race or other classes, you can say okay, the outcomes are actually balanced for the groups. It's not that one group is very much advantage over the other group. But if you cannot show that, that's also a signal again for us as users, especially if you have worked on your own AI literacy. They can say well, actually, they cannot show me if it's good. So this is not something, a tool or organization that I would want to work with. And also then if you can't show it, then the question is also then for the problem, okay, is it because they don't know what they need to look at, or is it that they're trying to hide something? So as an organization, also say okay, if you actually do all these steps, it can also then be a strength to the outside world, because they can also show well, actually, I know what the risks are. I know what steps I can take to mitigate that. I have done it, and I'm also transparent about it. If you approach it like that, it can also be your strength. So yeah, there are different things that you actually can do, but I think it's also important to. What I always stress is it's not rocket science actually, this, because if you're not impacted by these decisions, then of course then you will might think okay, it comes out of nowhere. But I'm no, it's just how things have always already been operating in specifically in certain societies, and this is just okay, are you going to be real or honest about it and address it or not? Because it's not that difficult to look at your data to see okay, is it balanced or not? It's not that difficult to and even bias isn't even necessarily an issue. It's only an issue for instance, if you implement a tool and say you can use it for everybody, and then later you find out that it actually doesn't work for everybody. But if you're honest, you could also say okay, well, actually, I've built this tool. It's only based on this data, or it only works for certain groups. If you are honest about that before, you can also only use it in those situations. But that's already a different way that you then approach it. But that's only, again, if you're honest and if you actually test these things. So yeah, I think it's honesty, transparency, that's very important here. And if companies are unwilling to do that, if you as a user have a proper understanding of how the technology works, they can also use that to then protect yourself, to say, okay, I'm not sure if I can trust that organization, so maybe don't do that, or I'm going to call out the practices in other ways. But yeah, those are some of the things that are relevant here.
Some fascinating ideas and concepts coming out here. I'm taking a few notes and we'll do a little summary at the end because there's some gold nuggets. So yeah, I think let's just reinforce that point. So what practical steps can companies really take to address those biases now? So we've got, I love the idea of an AI ethics board, and make sure that there's diversity on that board because it has to be intertwined the whole way through. Being realistic about society, what it's learning, where from and how. Being honest about the data that your output is based on. Some great tips already, but anything else that you think companies really need to think about when they're addressing those biases? And Nenny, let's go to you.
Yeah, I think I kind of brought it up earlier, but I think being transparent with how you're using AI. So if you are using AI in the recruiting process, tell people exactly how you use that AI. It shouldn't be a secret. I think there needs to be transparency, there needs to be communication. And I think, you know, establishing continuous monitoring and post-deployment review. Like it shouldn't be a one-time thing. Bias mitigation is not this, yeah, it's a thing that you need to continue doing. So I think even from that aspect, just making sure that you're continuously reviewing your AI systems. It's not just, oh yeah, we tested it a couple of years ago and yeah, most Black people got through. No, it has to be something that you're looking at. And again, having that AI ethics board definitely makes things easier. But being able to audit yourself in that way and really say, okay, are we, are we perpetuating any of those biases that we're trying not to? So yeah, that would be like my little additions, but I think all the ones that you have already are great.
I think what you could also, because like there are things, of course, that organizations need to do themselves. And that ethics board, that is indeed a very great addition, particularly like when you also fill it with people with different disciplines. Because like technology people, for instance, like also in data science, they often think like, okay, they know everything, but actually like we bring people in with from history or from law, etc. They also sociology, they bring in a different perspective. That's very, very important in such an ethics board. But I also think that there are things that organizations can do, but of course every organization then does the only little thing. It's also important to look at it like at a more like level, like this, like the AI sector as a whole. Also like the role that governments play in there when it comes to regulations, for instance, because like particularly when you consider like how AI is being infused in so many different areas, like recruitment, that's very important, like, but housing, healthcare, like those are like policing, those are very serious issues, serious matters. So like they need more than just the organization behind the technology like guiding it. You also really need something that comes from the more governmental, the regulatory level. So I think that's important. Like in Europe we have like the EU AI Act, that is a step, but that's still only Europe. And also like again, when I keep it real, it's like I also think like, okay, that the Europe position itself as a leader in AI ethics, that is nice, but I am also of Afro-Sudanese background, ancestors from Africa. Europe played a big role also in that. So, like when it comes to European ethics, I don't look to ethical leadership to Europe or to North America, for instance. I also think we need to be honest about like those kinds of things. Again, that's also part PR in there. Like, okay, we're the good ones. They're supposedly Europe can then position America as the bad ones, but at the same time, when it comes to the tech stack that we're using, that is very much American. And also when I look at the UK, for instance, like the American tech companies, they are making big inroads there, and the UK government is also very much helping there. So I'm like, yeah, then it's nice that Europe positions itself as the ethical ones, but yeah, there are, if it doesn't apply to everything that's doing in the whole world, then there's still an issue there. And another thing that I think it's important also when it comes to bias, because like we can talk about bias in the way that we use the technology in the outcomes that it might have, that they are biased, but I think it's also important to recognize that there's also bias that goes beyond that, also in the way that the technology is developed. We look at the resources that go into devices that we use. For instance, cobalt, coltan, like there's a lot of human rights violations that are in that supply chain leading up to that needs to be called out, because it's like it's nice if the system like is nice to me or is unbiased in a recruitment sense, but if to arrive at the technology there are blatant human rights violations going on with, for instance, in mines, like unregulated mining going on, children being used to mine those resources, that's also an issue that needs to be called out. And also the reason that there's not a lot of attention paid to that, for instance, when you look at the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the mining situation there, of course, anti-blackness plays into that, because like if the children were not black, if they were white children that are doing that, then there would be way more attention to those human rights violations. So I think that's also an important thing to also include when we talk about bias. Also the environmental impacts, like data centers, there are two things. They're like data centers, like okay, they have certain water usage and use, etc. That's already something to consider, like the what it actually the environmental footprint is of AI. But again, there's also another issue there. Like when you look at where data centers are placed, I sometimes also talk about, like, for instance, when you look at certain areas in the US, there's also environmental racism going on. Areas that are where mostly Black people live, like we talk about 70-80% Black people, that historically have already been subjected to like a chemical industry being placed there. So there are areas there with way higher cancer rates, up to like 3, 4, 5 times higher cancer rates. But there are now also data centers being placed there. Like an example is Memphis, Tennessee. There's a certain data center there of one of the big tech companies. Also one in Alabama, I know. And like those are historically Black areas that have already dealt with a lot of toxicity. They're still dealing with that pollution. And then you come with those data centers on top of that. And I think those kinds of ethical considerations are very much important to also include in this conversation, that it's not just in the outcomes when we use it, but also like everything that goes before that. Because like, if we only look at AI, like, okay, how it can, because when I talk about the future of work, it's nice for me to say like, okay, it can make stuff easier for me. But if people are dying because they have more pollution, that the little children that are mining the resource, then I'm like, yeah, nice, that's easier for me. But then I again come to the issue of ethics. Like, ethics is something that you really need to consider beforehand. And if that is what it takes for my life to be a little bit better, then I'm like, nah, I'm good. I can also do without that. So yeah, I think that's important to also stress those issues, because they are greatly affecting people, and only certain people of a certain hue are being affected. So yeah.
I, for one, am super grateful that you brought up some of those topics, Michael, because my personal experience as well, I sat in an ESG leadership team for 6 years, and I was the only person of colour in that team. And I used to bring up these issues, and people in the team were just completely unaware of them, because it wasn't their lived experience. It didn't affect them. It didn't necessarily affect people that they cared about. So again, the importance of having diversity embedded in all of these groups that have huge decision-making potential across companies is so important. So thank you for calling out some of those very painful but very real situations that are going on. I appreciate that. Nikkei.
100%. And I really wanted to link with some of the questions in the chat again. One that came up, and I'm going to ask 2 questions in one because I think they're connected. One from Michael Boyd. He was asking, what are the top considerations a CDO should take into account to implement responsible AI? Because I think, Michael, you mentioned responsible AI earlier, and that's talking beyond the AI policy. And the question that I think that links really nicely into that is, what should policymakers be doing to ensure the spread of AI is safe and ethical? And the person mentions that, and you'd already mentioned education to begin at primary school. Would you consider education to be a priority? So I think if you go for the top considerations of CDO to implement responsible AI, and then any on the is that the priority? Is education the priority when it comes to policy making and AI?
I think like top considerations that like responsible practices, ethical practices, safe practices, something that you really need to consider throughout the whole AI life cycle, right from the start and all throughout. And it is then also a continuous process. So like it already starts like I already said before, like even before you start an AI project, you then need to consider like, okay, where do I get my data from? Indeed, is it a good representation? But also like already consider like, okay, how will it impact people? Like for instance, like job displacement. That is something that you can consider already from the start. Like, okay, is that really something that you want? Like, how comfortable are you with that? And if you're comfortable with it, also you also need to be real in your communication about that. But that's something that you then need to consider already way before that. But then also like the people that you use to build your systems, like make sure that they have diverse backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, but also like different professions that provide like a different view in that process. The same is true to the ethics board that Anani also mentioned several times. Like there's also important to have like people with different backgrounds in there, and make sure that it is continuous. Also, like before I said, like you need to make sure that you test your systems, but testing is not something that you only do once. But that also has to do very much to do with the dynamic nature of the technology, because it's based on machine learning, because it's based on learning from data, that then also it can evolve. It can also like drift away from the original accuracy that it had. So you need to make sure that that over time that also still works. So you need to make sure that you keep looking at these matters, and not, like I said, like traditionally, like when people test models, they might see like, okay, well, it works well. They have accuracy of like 95%. You would say like, okay, it's great. But if you want to do it responsibly, you do also need to consider like subgroups that might be relevant, specifically in the society that you live in. If you know that there historically has been issues there, then you also need to make sure that you then test also specifically for those groups to see like if the outcomes also good for them and not just for the majority. So those are some of the things that I think you can do. But it's really important to have like that responsible and ethical mindset right from the start and all throughout, and like to keep it going, and also like just be honest about your communications, because like I said, like bias isn't always necessarily an issue. Like it's probably fine if a system only works in a certain situation or for a certain group, but they also need to be real about it and not drop it out to the world and say like, hey, you can use it in all situations, works for everyone, while that's not the case.
Aneni, over to you for the remainder of the question.
Sorry, what was the question?
Okay, do you
I was
wanna-
just listening to
question was
Michael and I was like, that was so
around,
insightful. I've forgotten already.
It was around, sorry, I was so engrossed in what Michael
Yeah, me
was saying.
too.
The question was around policymakers being able to ensure the spread of AI is safe and ethical. Just taking the background of some of the things we've heard and the things that Michael has brought up in terms of human rights as well, would you say that, just adding to the question because I'm actively listening, would you say that education would be the priority in terms of the spread of AI, ensuring the spread of AI is safe and ethical? Would you say education, or would you say maybe is there something else that we should be thinking about outside of education?
I think education should and can be the first move, because it kind of addresses that chronic risk. I mean, in terms of it, I mean, primary school, any level of education in the workplace, but you can't be clued up about something that you don't know. You don't know how will you know how to mitigate the risk around it if you don't actually know what it is? So I think technical literacy as a whole, digital literacy, needs to be a priority for any country, any government, any workplace. Because at the end of the day, the people who are the most at harm from things like AI have the most to lose if we are not, clued up with how the technology works. Like Michael said, there's so much that goes into the design of these AI systems. A lot of those biases are, some of it is systemic. Some of it has been intentionally put into the data sets. I mean, I'll give you one example. I remember there was a few years ago when I don't like this example, but I'll give it. Some researchers had essentially put into the data set. It was like a little joke between them. It's not funny at all, but they essentially started putting some images of gorillas in a data set of Black people. And it was meant to be this like inside joke that, oh yeah, but what ended up happening was that when the algorithm was made and trained and it's learn and learn and learn and learn, and now it's public facing, you were searching for certain terms, Black women, different things, and up was, Google was returning gorillas. So I think that's a very clear example of what happens when the people in the room all look a certain type of way. I mean, I can even talk about something that I made, which a couple years ago, which was basically a beauty app. And this app would essentially, and the reason I'm telling this story is because I designed this app with education in mind. I realized that as the more and more we were going with technology, a lot of people didn't actually know what AI is or what the risks were. So I made a beauty app. This was back in the day when I was trying to be a social media influencer. And I made this app, and essentially in the data set, I put parameters that essentially said that Black people were unattractive. So there were certain features in there that were linked to Black people, but I designed it. What people saw on Twitter was a nice shiny app. Oh, it's a beauty app. It tells you how attractive you are, and it tells you, and it could also guess your ethnicity. So I've put this up now, but I've not told anyone that I've put this bias in there. And people are like, oh yeah, this is such a cool app. Can I try? So I started getting people from Twitter, from Instagram. It went very viral, and different people from different places were using it. Everyone had like no issues with surprisingly, the app actually returned most people's ethnicity quite accurately. But the main issue was that when people looked into the parameters and some of those things I'd used to design the algorithm for unattractiveness, on myself, I got an attractiveness of 2%. I mean, I don't think I'm the most best looking person, but 2% is quite rude. So I was just like, I was like, and then obviously then it goes viral for the wrong reasons. People are like, oh my God, how dare you say that this and this and this, and why would you create an app like this, and your app isn't working. And then I used it as I guess, an educational moment to be like, no, let me show you the whole process of how I designed this. Let me show you exactly why I did this. Because sometimes when like the ramifications are a young child or somebody who's like 13 on social media who's using an app and it's a beauty app, and they're thinking, oh my God, I'm the most beautiful child ever, and then they're using this app and the app is telling them that you're unattractive, or they've got plastic surgery apps now, they'll tell you, oh, just if you just fixed your nose a little bit, you'd be, yeah, it's scary stuff. So I think it has to start from early in terms of education. It has to start the amount of children, even when I'm on the train, kids as young as 5, 6 are like faces all up in the smartphone. They're engaging with AI every single day, and they don't know what the back end of it all is. Like, that's left to, I think, us as adults and as people who are trying to use AI responsibly to educate and let people know. So I do think, yes, a first move would be education. But I think it all goes back to governments. Like, governments need to establish AI safety commissions with technical authority to audit algorithms. There needs to be like procedures in place that actually mean that we can override AI when AI starts going wayward. We can shut it down. We can make sure that there's things in place that AI will not end up taking over the world. So yeah, I will say education is the main one to start with, but at the end of the day, it all falls back on policymakers. It all falls back on government. And it's really their responsibility to make sure that companies are being audited appropriately and properly.
Wow, that's incredible.
I could listen to you two all day, and I think this conversation could go into layers upon layers upon layers and all sorts of follow-up events, but absolutely fascinating. And I just wanted to, I've been writing notes as we've been going along, and even just during the conversation, the amount of different business areas that we have mentioned that AI intertwines with: law, social impact, recruitment, responsible business, EDI, supply chain ethics, environmental impact. It is going to intertwine with all these areas of your business. So yeah, it's definitely worth getting to work together some little task forces or some ethics boards. I love that. I really, really love that idea. Nico, over to you for final thoughts.
No, this has been incredible. And again, just to reiterate, I could go on, and I think I need a private tutoring from you two, because you just expanded my mind so much. But we've come to the end of the hour, and we do have Zara on the call. Before Zara joins, I just wanted to thank you both, and for taking part in this session. There are more questions we could have asked, and I'd just like if you can unmute or just clap, and just to say thank you to Aneni and Michael for taking the time. Just please do so. Zara, I'll hand back to you to do the more events that we have coming up just now.
Thank you. I'm just gonna share my screen. Hopefully you can see it. Can everyone see that?
No, yes, we can.
Oh,
now.
perfect. Yeah, so we have some more Black History Month talks coming. It's every Wednesday, so same time as today. We have these QR codes that if you'd like to scan through your screen, it should take you to the Eventbrite page and you can sign up. And yeah, we would love to have you guys there. I'll just leave this up for a bit.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Isabella, as well. Isabella runs some very interesting sessions as part of Impact Kinship. If you want to find out about that, Isabella, would you pop a a link in the chat as well for that as well, because then
Yeah.
you can really expand and explore and learn more about all sorts of things to do with these sorts of topics and similar. But thank you all for joining as well. And again, happy Black History Month.
Thank you for joining, everybody. Wonderful session. Thank you, Aneni and Michael.
Thank you too. I enjoyed it.
I hope everybody has a lovely rest of the day.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.